Good evening, folks. Tonight's pre-quarantine, or rather pre-weekend, being a Friday evening, pre-weekend quarantine video, which as probably all of you are experiencing, the quarantines are beginning to lift. So maybe it's not such a quarantine anymore. I'm going to have to come up with another title like just today's video. So tonight's video is on this. And it actually has, I would say, nothing to do with reloading. So this is another tangent hobby that I'll be diving into on my channel. And this is kind of interesting because I got into reloading, or rather I got interested in reloading when I was in the military, the Army specifically, in the mid-80s. Bought my book. I think it was like ABCs of Reloading back in the mid-80s. I'll have to try and, I don't think I have it anymore, but I'll have to try and maybe find it on eBay just for memento's sake. Oh, allergies are killing me this week. Hopefully not COVID-19. And I just couldn't get into reloading because I lived in the barracks, and that's just not something you do with a bunch of roommates in shared space. I had to keep my firearm in the armory and check it out, check it in, check it out when I went to go shooting, when I lived in Arizona, when I lived in a free time, a free place that no longer exists. In any case, in the mid-80s, I got interested in reloading and had to put that on hold for many, many years. And then as I got older, I got back into it, or at least I was able to get into it. And this hobby is very similar in the sense that I picked this hobby up in the early 90s, just as we were having kids. And came to California, and things were kind of quiet-ish in terms of no craziness around the family, and had a little extra time. I was taking some night classes. I think I was taking Pascal at the time at a community college, and for one reason or another, I don't remember if it was something on campus or not, we also lived in a city that had an amazing Japanese center, and within that center they had a Japanese tea garden, and that tea garden was just an amazing aggregation of all kinds of bonsai trees, large and small. So bonsai started to interest me, and I think I took a class at the Japanese Center in between my community college classes for programming, and I got interested in bonsai. And this was something that consumed me for, maybe a good year and a half. And I had my trees, and I was wiring them up, and I was growing them, and I was training them, and all that good stuff. And then kids came along, and I'll tell you what, when you're in your 20s, your early 20s, and you have hobbies, and then you have kids, guess what happens to your hobbies? They go away. They go dormant for a very long time. So I hadn't thought about doing bonsai since the early 90s. So we're talking almost 30 years ago. I was doing something in the garage about a week ago, and I actually came across this cutter. And this was my original cutter that I bought in the early 90s. And this was my primary tool because all I was doing was little juniper Sierra kind of trees that didn't require any massive tool sets. And everything was done with this wire cutter, or excuse me, with this cutter, this branch cutter. And I'm probably sure I did cut wire with it, because when I found this a couple weeks ago, the two ends to the mouths, two sides to each of the mouths, were completely torn up. It looked like a bunch of W's. There was just hills and peaks. I mean, you could, it just looked like a bad stock chart. And I thought, let me see if I can revive this. So I took it to the grinder, and I grind this down a little bit. And once I started grinding it down, I realized I could no longer close it. And the reason I could no longer close it was because this particular side was hitting this post. So when it hit that post about there, that's about how much I could close it. Let's see, where, oh, there I am. So I had a good, 1/8 of an inch, maybe a little more, maybe 3/16. And that wasn't going to work. So I decided to bust out, I did some more grinding, and then I busted out the Dremel, and I carved out a little notch so that it would recess and then allow me to close. So I'm now, again, it's not perfect, but I tried it out on some small limbs, and it works. And I threw it in a plastic bag, oiled it up, and got the rust to be less destructive, less noticeable. But again, this is 30+ years old. It actually is made in Japan by MASAAK, so I don't know how legit this is for a carbon steel bonsai tool. I know bonsai tools can be, excuse me, ridiculously expensive. My Kool-Aid is coming back. So I know bonsai tools can be ridiculously expensive. In fact, I started looking, and the Japanese bonsai tools are really crazy priced. The Chinese, who are also big into bonsai, actually a lot of cultures and countries are. China is big on it big time. They like big bonsai, as in enormous size, as opposed to dwarfed bonsais. But I started looking at tools, like, oh, let me get a tool set, and crazy prices, even on Amazon. Again, the real stuff, the Japanese stuff, very expensive, whereas the Chinese, some of the Chinese, or as Wrangle Star likes to say, Chinesium, the knockoff stuff is really cheap, but in both price and probably quality. So I'm poking around online and see if I can find something. But let me go talk about my second thing that's on tonight's show. So again, I said I was into it a little bit, and I found my original training pots, and clean them out a little bit. Clean as in a light wash, and put some new mesh screen at the bottom. I don't know if you can see that. Just to, when I start to plant and water, so that the material doesn't go through. Little tiny 4-inch, 5-inch things. This was actually the screen from 30 years ago that was still wired in here. I don't know. This was part of the wire that was holding that screen in, and then there was some copper wire that I don't remember where I put. I think it's somewhere. This might be it. Yeah, this looks like maybe a 2.5, 3 millimeter. I used to use copper wire just because it was readily available, cheap. And I think now the big thing is black aluminum covered wire, or black aluminum anodized wire. It's lightweight, relatively easy to work with. But I found these old pots, and I thought I would clean them out. And what was kind of funny, and I put screens in each one, what's kind of funny was made in Japan. So I don't even know how much these little 6-inch trainers are. I think they're probably dirt cheap. But again, I don't know if they're made in Japan anymore, as opposed to made in China. And you can probably hear what these are. These are a little nicer because these are actually pottery or clay pots. And I don't know where. I don't see any markings. I'm sure I got these when we lived near the Japanese tea garden, wherever they recommended shopping. And again, no markings on this one. So I thought, hey, I've got some of the stuff. Why not get into it a little bit, which kind of will lead me into my third segue of what's next. So because I'm getting old, I figured I would make life easier and pick up an El Cheapo turntable, round table, turnstile, whatever these things are called, just to be able to work on whatever I'm going to be working on, to find the right side, the right view, the right way I want to cut, the right way I want to trim, because finding the front side, back side is all about the character of the tree and the trunk. So this will help me do that. So this was a kind of cool, cheap pickup. So something I never had before, and thought it was worth the $10. this one I splurged a little bit on. This was lost for 30 years, and part of that had to do with kind of like the pots. They were just on a shelf in a corner, a dark corner, ignored forever and ever. And I thought, hey, if I'm going to start to poke around and get into this, I thought if I'm going to pick up a tool set somewhere, and sometimes a tool set will come with a tool. What's the right way to put this? So this is like a rolling tool set cover, and I thought this was, I again stumbled on this online, and I thought this was just beautifully crafted. Very soft leather, handmade, stitched. Obviously I had to do my own little ID tag there. So reloader and a nice little maple, a red maple. And the idea behind this reminds me of my motorcycle toolkit, because when it's got tools in it, it'll be a cylinder, because it's a roll bag. And in fact, maybe that's why I picked it up, because it reminded me so much of my motorcycle toolkit. And the idea behind this is a toolkit that has a couple zippered pockets, two on each end, for bigger stuff like maybe a handsaw, and then it unrolls, and it's huge. I mean, covers the whole bench. And then obviously here's the other zippered pocket, a little bit smaller, so maybe which I don't know, maybe what, but just the craftsmanship. Not the thickest leather, but it is leather, and it's just really well crafted and well done. I think there's 11. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. Yeah, 11 pockets, which doesn't necessarily relegate this to 11 tools, because depending on the tool size, you know, a couple tools to a pocket. I've seen other roll bags that have pockets on each side. Those are kind of cool as well. And who knows, maybe I'll pick something else up when I get a little more into it. But I thought this would be a nice start for an old tool that was resurrected and brought back to life from the dead back in the early 90s, to be the first tool to what's the right word, when they smash the champagne bottle on the ship, to commemorate, to christen. Yes, this is christening. So we are christening this tool belt, and if I'm OCD, then this should be in the 6th. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, there's no way, because we're going to be off. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right, we'll be OCD and put it directly in the middle. All right, so we have now christened the new tool belt, and now it has a tool in it, and hopefully over the next, I don't know, weeks, months, try and figure out what I'm going to pick up in terms of tools. Not a lot is needed initially, but again, we'll see where this goes, because I don't know how serious I'm going to be about it. And now that I have a little time on my hands, and I'm old, we'll see where it goes. So that's reloading / reloader bonsai. I'll have to get a better acronym or name going for that one. All for now.